I'm going to start out with you, Ursula, and go right down. Help us out. If we had to assess where we are today as a nation in innovation, how would you describe it?
Well, I think I am two words. One is I'm optimistic because we still, as a nation, invest a large amount of our capital, intellectual capital, towards the future and creating products and services for the future. But I'm a little nervous as well. So I'm optimistic because we lead, but I'm nervous because we're not investing, I think, in some of the downstream efforts that we have to invest in, like education, to assure that we continue to lead into the future.
John?
I'm optimistic, I think in part because that's my DNA. I do think we're at an inflection point, unfortunately. I think traditionally America is led by a long way in the area of innovation. I think if you now watch what's occurring, a lot of innovation, new startups, etc., are coming from the emerging countries. So if you think your pillars of innovation are education, infrastructure, i.e. broadband in my terms, catching new market transitions, supportive government working to achieve those, and all these groups working together, I probably would not give us as good a grades as I'd like to see in terms of being the innovator 5 to 10 years out.
Absolutely.
Still leading, but our leadership is shrinking rapidly.
Okay. How about you, Jeff?
Gary, I'd say companies better because we have to be. We have to be more competitive. So companies putting more in R&D, and I mean both big and small. I just think the state of play has gotten more competitive, and we're all investing more of our revenue back into R&D. So I think the state of innovation in big and small companies is better. As a country, look, the rest of the world is moving faster than we are. And really, I always think about competitiveness first. The world's not standing still. China's not standing still. I think if you look at the downturn, maybe one of the countries to talk about is Germany. You know, we all like to talk about China and India, but Germany is one of these countries that's come out of the recession stronger than it went in because they focused on competitiveness, job creation, productivity, innovation. And so the U.S. is going to have to play in a very competitive world.
If you think about it, we have, it's back to the trillions of dollars, billions of dollars outside the United States. What good does it do outside the United States? Closing a border, meaning making it difficult to do business with a huge customer base, billions of dollars, because we make it difficult for them to do business with us, seems also this very illogical. It's hard to explain. I'm on the President's Export Council, and when I got on this, I actually started reading a whole bunch of stuff, and I was amazed at the illogic. It's just not logical.
Could you give an example?
So Korea. We just passed, thank goodness, the Korea.
Not yet in Congress.
I know, but we got it out of the first, stranglehold. It's out of that and has to go to Congress. What difficulty, what pain could it be for us to say, yes, we want to trade openly with Korea? There are a lot of people over there. They have money. We have technology and goods that they probably want to buy. Seems like a reasonable thing to do. Why does it take so long? Because we've actually wrapped this very logical thing in a lot of other discussions. They're taking our jobs. There are people who would have to come. They educated here and they leave. It's become a debate not around the substance, but around some other things. I just say, keep it simple. Keep it simple. 6 billion people. Only 300 million of them live in our country.
And yet we haven't signed a trade agreement in 4 years. And the Canada,
everybody
South America, Asia, Europe, of all furiously entering trade agreements.
And we have.
How does that affect us in terms of innovation?
Having a big market. This is back to the point that Jeff and John said. Having a market drives innovation and drives investment that drives innovation, right?
So without those trade agreements, it's tougher to manufacture in the U.S., isn't it?
It's tougher to justify an investment. Right. If you say, no, I'm not going to be able to sell it in the world, you say, well, I'm not going to spend a lot of money on turbines. Why would I spend money on turbines if I have 300 million people who can buy them? It's not even 300 million people, but whatever the number in this country. If you open up the world to your product set, to the chance of having your product set, I think you drive investment directly.
Let me take a chance at kind of tying the two concepts together. It's a very complex, multiple variable equation we're talking about, but there are only about 6 or 7 variables. And if you address each one of them in a logical way, you can make progress very rapidly. How do you really create an environment for exports and encourage job creation in the country? How do you create an education system covering your short-term gaps, intermediate gaps, long-term? How do you build out the best infrastructure in the world for this? How does government and business work together to create jobs, do no harm? And how do we really collaborate together? Those are all within our grasp. But what you've seen at this show is the speed of innovation does not match our decision process.
As a
Emerging
government,
countries-
you mean? As a
in government or business or the ease of doing all the above.
Okay.
If you're 1 year behind at this show, you're toast. And yet the policies and programs we're talking about, from everything how patents get approved, to encouraging exports, to bringing back money, to even get an improvement of how many green cards can you allocate is a year-by-year basis. We've got to get rid of that, because the speed is what it's all about here. We're falling behind on speed. And I think the U.S. has the cards to win here.
I agree.
And to get in the top 5 categories in every group again. But to Jeff's point and Ursula's group, we've got to start measuring it. We're falling behind on IPOs, we're falling behind on graduates, we're falling behind on startups, we're falling behind on job creation. And let's start making every decision on how we get that back in line. Because innovation, we are the best in the world at. Today, we are hanging up a sign saying you're not welcome to come to this country. We've got to change that. And for those students who come to this country, we've got to say, when you're through, here's an automated green card stapled to your diploma. If you look at our patents among our companies, I bet you better than 50% of the patents of our 3 companies are from foreign nations.
Really true.
John, thank you for
That
pivoting
used
to
to
that,
be-
because we have great universities, and we're kicking out most of the graduate students in the science and math and hard sciences are coming from abroad, and we are kicking them out as soon as they graduate.
Yes.
You think that's a bad idea?
Well,
how about each of you? Is there a consensus on that point?
It's an absolutely horrible idea. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
And if you want to hire these people, you have to go to abroad
The way
and
that
have
we're
a
approaching this
subsidiary,
problem,
right?
yeah, the way that we're approaching this problem is that there are enemies out there. And if all we can do is keep the enemies away, we'll be successful. I think it's just great that India and China and Pakistan, whoever, Germany are graduating and developing engineers and using our school system to do that. So it's not a fight about them, it's a struggle about us.
Let me just add another dimension to all this, right? So we make about, let's say, 120 heavy-duty gas turbines. Almost all of them are exported from the United States. You know, high-tech power generation. Our biggest customer over the last 4 or 5 years has been Saudi Electric Company. I go to Riyadh, meet with the management team, sit around and have lunch at least once a year. 40 guys around lunch, sitting around talking about what we can do better, things like that. All of them are in their 40s and 50s, all of them educated in the United States, every one of them. It allows me to beat Siemens and all the, you know, it creates jobs in the U.S. The relationship that now all of the young people from Saudi Electric are going to Canada, Australia, places to go to school. So the next generation of relationships that we've enjoyed are missing.
Yep.
And that creates jobs, it creates trust. And so I just think we've allowed this to become so politicized.
Right.
And it's so gosh darn important.
Do you think it was the September 11th switch in attitude that caused a lot of this, of attracting the best and the brightest that we
I think it was a little bit of that, but it's the economic downturn actually made it easy to demonize people who were not here, to make it a competition that shouldn't be a competition, the way that we're actually approaching it. It's obviously 9/11 didn't make things easy, but the fact that we didn't take care of our own infrastructure, we didn't build out an infrastructure, we don't have a good educational system, makes it more necessary for us every single day to protect the borders. And the last thing we have to do is that. We have to actually build up a cadre of people that can innovate and that we can actually offer to the world. We have 300 million people in this country. So we can just trade without 300 million people all day. And it's not going to be a very big winning equation if we eliminate the other 6 billion around the world to trade with.
5% versus 95.
It's just
Yeah,
not
I
smart.
think it's even more basic. We've got to do a better job of government and business working together to say, here's why it's good for America. Because each one of those engineers that I get from China or India who is educated here or who comes here to start their company, there are 2 more American jobs that we create within our company, and there are 5 more in Silicon Valley or Boston 128 or RTP that get generated. So we've got to get back to what what was one of our key competitive advantages versus everyone in the world. Our immigration policy used to encourage the best and brightest to come here, stay here, start companies here. We now have reversed that. I think we have all the cards to win. The question is, do we have the courage and the will and the fortitude, and do we have the leadership in business and government to say we really want to win? Not incrementalism improvement. One common theme you see among three leaders here in the companies that we represent is confidence. We can take on anyone in the world, but also a healthy paranoia. If we don't change, we will get left behind as leaders and as companies. And so this is one that I think we're painting perhaps a little bit the wrong way. It isn't a question of a country has to win or lose. The whole world can win.
Exactly.
Currently, the U.S. is at an inflection point. Are our children going to have a higher standard of living than we do or not? And for the first time, that's really being questioned, and their children at the present time will not. And do we want to get back as one of the top participants, but do what America does so well, which is share? Because all of us do the same thing. You sit in a cabinet meeting in Russia. You sit across the table from the prime minister in India. You speak to the president in Mexico. There is a openness to saying, how do we bring American concepts and ideas, and how do we all win together, which I think is very doable. And that's what we're really saying. Globalization is here to stay. Speed of innovation is here to stay. It isn't going to create winners and losers unless the companies or the countries make that mistake.
That was well said, John. And you mentioned the word paranoid, I think.
Yes.
Companies correctly, leaders are paranoid. I think that came from Intel, but I think that's pervasive. And I mean that in a positive way, that you're always
It is pervasive.
considering.
Yes.
But
You don't survive if you don't.
But our country at this point, our national leadership doesn't appear paranoid. In fact, it appears that our political parties are in corners, very opposite from each other, and they may be even putting their party before even their country, and they're not solving the biggest problems. They're kicking them down for the future. Is that's obviously my opinion, you don't have to agree with it, but do we lack national paranoia that we should be having about, we've obviously led for the last century. Will the United States be able to lead?
I think everybody, again, what makes us paranoid is that we see a lot. In other words,
You travel around.
you travel a lot. I spend 60% of my time out of the office, most of the time outside the country. And I've been going to China and India since 1984, right? So I actually know, I have the burden of knowing what's happening, and that makes me, I get back and I'm like, I sleep like a baby, wake up once an hour crying. That's what it's like to be. That's what it's like to be a CEO.
Yeah.
Now, I think what's good, what may be good, and we're all business people, not politicians, but I think with what these elections are telling us is, if unemployment stays at 9.4%, you're going to get fired, right? Every 2 years. And that we don't care about all the debates that can go on cable TV shows and stuff like that. We want to see results. That might create very healthy paranoia, and I get back to goals, metrics, how do you spend your time?
Yep.
And that's the life that we all live. I think one of the things that we can do, both in the communities we live in Washington, is say, here's what we're seeing in Germany. Here's what we're seeing in India. Here's what we're seeing in Russia. And man, we got to go, because whether or not this is a global economy, that's already been decided.
Yes.
Really, it's either, is the U.S. going to participate or not participate? But that's already, that is no longer a debate. That's been decided. So now it's, how do we win?
How do we win?
That's got to be the focus.
How do we participate? How do we win? And I think the paranoia question, it's interesting because I paused. I think that we are paranoid, but I think around the wrong things. I mean...
Okay.
No, we can actually finish each of the sentences, all three of us. Completely agree on both the points raised.
Okay. And like I said, John said it really well. This is not a fight about whether or not India should stay behind. I mean, that's also been decided.
It has.
China is not going to stay behind. This is not a question about any of those. This is about what are we going to choose to do to make sure that we participate as the world grows. That's the question. So the debates that we're hearing are debates that have nothing to do with that. And so I think we're paranoid, but not about...
Well, let me ask it a different way then. Has the business community failed to define the issues well for the rest of the country? I mean, that message is not getting out there.
The answer is yes.
Yes. You cannot say no to that question, because if we were good at it, they would know, right? Obviously, we're not doing it.
I think you've got to give very poor marks both to business and government over the last several years about both working together and defining the issues and doing what's right in terms of educating each other and saying, how do we all win together? Having said that, the one thing that America has been always very good about is we're remarkably resilient. My dad's 87 years old. He said, the right leader always comes at the right time. Companies in America have an ability to readjust. We still are the best place in the world. People want to come and live here, all nationalities. Our innovation, our legal system, even in spite of some of the problems in patents and other issues, it's still one of the best in the world and most predictable. And there's a willingness to work together toward common goals. So I don't think it's about parties. I think it's about, do we move to the middle, and do we put America not just back to work? Do we set an audacious goal with the top 5 in the top 5 categories, and do we go make it happen as a country? And I think I'd give us poor marks as business leaders and really keeping that forefront, and poor marks as government leaders. And I don't think it's about party. Now, I do see signs for the first time in quite a while that looks like we have a chance to re-engage.
I agree.
That says there's an inflection point or a tipping point. Do we have the healthy national paranoia that's needed? No. Because it used to be, when we were growing up, 18 of the top 20 companies in the world were here in America. Today it's 5, on its way to 0. We're in the middle of a comeback opportunity. And I think it's a very good book. And for those of you who haven't read it, I encourage you to take a look at it.